There's so much I want to talk to you about. They gave me an hour, so we'll see where we go with that. I keep beating on my brain because there's so many things that I want to talk about. I was talking about your childhood resiliency and siblings matter so much, and how much my sibling relationships matter to me, and how it helped me overcome so much of the stuff I went through. So I want to share a little bit. I'm not going to get deep into my story because it will make me cry. I don't think we ever heal from trauma. We may move past it, we will live with it, and deal with it in different ways, but our pain is always still there. The memories are there. The loss is there. And so my story is, it's called Building a Treehouse because that's part of my resiliency. I want to talk to you a little bit about a mantra that as a small child and even as an adult, it's a little weird, all right? I know I'm a little crazy, but I've worked through a lot of stuff. But breathe, sissy, breathe is actually what brought about this whole talk. I was talking to Darla Beal and Tiffany Petro and all of that, and they're like, Terry, you need to, come up with something. And I'm trying to think of a story from childhood because that's how my brain works. Usually a story from childhood brings on memories and helps me develop something that matters to me. And breathe, sissy, breathe was the thing that kept coming to my mind, and it brought back memories of a child. I don't remember why I did it. I just know I held my breath while I would pass out as a small child. And I never remember the circumstances. I just remember seeing my brother's face, and he would lean over me and do, breathe, sissy, breathe, breathe, sissy, breathe, because I would turn blue and pass out. And he was only 2 years older than me, and I'm sure it scared the crap out of him. I remember a few times it was because he threw a football at me and hit me right in the chest. And at those times he's like, please don't tell mom. Breathe, sissy, don't tell mom. And he was worried he would get in trouble. But most of the time, I wonder, because I don't remember it. My brother says, well, I remember you doing it sometimes when mom would get really mad and start screaming. And you'd get upset and start crying because she hurt your feelings. And so you would cry so hard that you'd lose your breath. And then I would pass out. So I imagine, since I don't remember it, maybe it was a tool, a behavior thing to get my way. I don't know. You know what I mean? It was just something that I did. And then as I grew up and started thinking about my life and the things I'd been through, I noticed for me, when I have anxiety, it's in my chest and it affects my breathing. So I still weirdly catch myself saying, breathe, sissy, breathe. And I have to tell you a little bit about how I got the name Sissy. So I'm going to go back and give you a little background. So my mother, God rest her soul, who was crazy as a bat. I love her. But my uncle's name was Terry. And my cousin's name was Terry. It wasn't Terry Jr., it was another uncle's kid. And I always wondered, why would you name me Terry when there's already 2 Terrys in the family? So I became known as Sissy, and I still am, and no one else, Brandy. You guys, nobody gets to call me that. My friends that are here, my coworkers, I hate it. My family on my mom's side still calls me Sissy. And one time, my aunts and uncles loved to sit and talk and tease me about holding my breath. And then they recall, my mom actually took me to the doctor for it because she was so worried that I did this all the time. And remind you, this is back in probably the 70s, it had to be in the early mid-70s, and the doctor said to my mom, excuse my language, whoop her ass, she'll quit being stubborn and she'll breathe. And so that was my mom's new theory. Every time I would hold my breath and pass out, I got the belt. And it did not make me catch my breath, I guarantee you. It just made me cry harder. Thinking about my job and working as a court appointed special advocate with my team and the children that we work with and all the sibling relationships we see and how powerful those are and the resiliency that can be built within those matter to me. And it's always been a passion of mine just because of my life, being in foster care myself and the different things that I'll get into a little bit as I move into the actual bones of what I want to talk about today. But how important it is for our kids to be together and have those strong relationships, especially when you're growing up in abuse and neglect. A lot of our older siblings are the caregivers of our littler siblings, and taking them away can cause just added trauma. And I mean, sometimes there is nothing else that can be done. I mean, I do understand that sometimes if we get 5, 6 siblings in a group, there is no way one family can take all those kids depending on behaviors. So in our job, there are things that actually do affect siblings remaining together. But I know everybody on our team does a really good job of making sure that our kids are seeing each other and spending time together. Because we do understand how valuable those moments in children's lives are. And I think, relationships, we always think about they're meant to last a lifetime, right? We build all kinds of different relationships in our lives. We build our parents as one of our first relationships, and our siblings is probably our second relationship, and actually the longest relationship we'll ever have, because our parents will pass away. If we're unfortunate, we'll be in our 50s and 60s when that happens. But some of us, our parents are dying when we're in our 20s and our 30s, or maybe we never even had our parents because they died when we were at birth or toddlers, right? And so our siblings are probably one of the most important relationships we will have in our life, even if their family is sometimes dysfunctional and hard to have. I think there's moments in our relationships with our siblings where things can go really well and things go bad because we have a life story together. And sometimes those life stories, our perception of our sibling can be negative, that we feel like as I felt with my brother at times in my life, instead of him lifting me up, he was one more person telling me I was doing wrong. And so our sibling relationships are really important, and they are intended to last a lifetime. Something that we do really well tomorrow, a few of us are here from Cottington County that are going to talk about building that resiliency in our communities and doing adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, and how important that is for people to understand. And I wonder if I would have known more about ACEs and had that education, or my family would have had that education as young parents, would my life have turned out different, and would I have had to go through all the abuse and neglect that I went through because my parents did not understand. Literally, they did not understand that what they were doing was very traumatizing and how it would affect me long term in my life. And two things that I think really matter when we're talking about siblings is their personalities and our birth order. I think our personalities can play such a huge part. My brother was 2 years older than me, so birth order for him is the eldest, but he was also very logical. And so he saw everything. His perception of our home was completely different than mine. I was the oldest daughter, so I had 2 siblings younger than me, but I was the oldest daughter, and I was very relational and emotional. So he's logical and grounded. And I remember as kids, and even as teenagers, he'd always say, "Sissy, it is not you. Quit taking what mom is doing personal. It's not about you. I don't understand why you get so upset. She is broken. It is her that is wrong." But I never believed it because everything I heard her say or do felt personal to me. I felt like I was wrong, that I was bad. He did not. So his logical brain was very much built for success in a chaotic family, in a chaotic world, because he can separate himself from everything that went on and be like, "Nope, you're the broken one, not me, and you're not going to break me." Where everything I do is 110%, even if it's bad for me, I still give it my all. And so I just dived into the chaos because my brain worked that way. It was just very emotional and very relational. So everything I heard, felt, or saw was right in that part of my brain that says, "How does this make you feel?" Where my brother was in the part of his brain was, "What am I learning from this?" So he actually was learning how to be a better parent, he wasn't a parent at the time, but those skills were being taught to him. Critical thinking and problem solving just because of how his brain worked. Where it took me many more years to develop all that. Something you also need to know about me before I get into building tree houses is that my father had his own business and he had a salvage junkyard. So he sold parts to farmers, tractors, combines. So there was machinery everywhere in our backyard. He had like probably 50, 60 acres of just junk. And so that is part of my story. So you need to know that. Building tree houses for me with my brother taught me 4 actually really important things. It taught me how to build a foundation, how important our foundations are, And even in dysfunctional homes, foundations are being built within sibling relationships. Our parents may not be doing a good job of it, but I think if the siblings figure stuff out on their own because they're taking care of each other, and one of them, usually the oldest, learns to lead. And even though they're not purposely doing it, I think with my brother, he accidentally instilled a lot of stuff in me that I needed later in my life. And so building that foundation was important. And one of the things he taught me when we were building tree forts was that structure. I mean, I remember going out into the woods around our house. There was equipment everywhere. There was trees everywhere. And we would spend hours, if not days, as I toddled behind him as his little sister, and he would look for the perfect tree. Because you had to have just the right branches and the right fit for the wood to sit. So you could have that flat floor, and it would be safe. And so we would spend hours looking for that tree, and as he would tell me about why that tree wouldn't work, because I'd find one that I thought, well, that's a really pretty branch, I like, but he's like, but Terry, the rest isn't there. And his communicating, even though it's probably sometimes grudgingly, and he was forced to be my best friend because we lived about 14 miles out of town, and I was the only person he had to play with. I chose him because he was like my little knight as a kid, right? But he was forced to deal with me, and thank God he had a kind nature. But he taught me all about that foundation and that structure, looking for the things I need in my life to make sure I can move forward and do healthy things. So as a young child, our parents were still together, and things actually were not bad. My mother had kind of like she was never diagnosed, but she was one person during the week, like a Jekyll Hyde, and then on the weekends, we would always take off and go up to her family's. So when we would get up to her family, she would just start drinking, and we lived in the bars all weekend. We all piled in the car, like 3 or 4 of her brothers, sometimes there was 2 or 3 cars, all of their kids, so we were with like 12, 13 of our cousins, and we would go bar hopping all day and half the night. And I remember being 10 and 12 years old, and me and my brother, 2 or 3 in the morning, are driving cars back to the farm because all of our parents were so drunk that they couldn't drive, so we would drive. And then it's just placing us in situations with a lot of people that were not good, so that because they weren't watching us, and they would let us go outside and run around, and of course, you'd have other drunk adults that would follow us out, bad things happen. So I think my mother's ability to keep us safe was very skewed, because when she was up with her family, she became a whole other person. So my life, it could be very good, and then it could get really ugly. It could be very good, then it would get ugly. And then when my parents, slowly, when I was probably 6th grade, I remember being in 6th grade, and we got ready to go to school. And our parents sat us down on the couch and said, by the way, we're getting divorced. When you come home tonight, Dad will be moved out. Anyway, we went to school, and that was it. And I remember spending the whole day in the bathroom crying. And I took it very personal that my dad didn't love me. He was leaving because of what did I do? I was trying to figure out what I did because it was out of the blue. It felt out of the blue. I remember my parents only one time that I recall them fighting, and my mom was actually physically assaulting my dad and getting in the middle of them and trying to make her stop. And that was the day I realized I was very young that I actually hated my mother, is what went through my brain and stayed in there for many years. So whenever my mom tried to parent me, I rebelled because I didn't like her. So I didn't care what she said. I would argue and be disrespectful, which turned into a really horrible relationship for me and her as I became a teenager and my dad was no longer there as a sounding board or protector. So things got really ugly. Another thing when we were building those tree houses that I think is really important is the different supports and things that you need. So as we found our tree, my brother said, this is the tree, Terry. We can build an awesome tree house in this tree. And then he would use me as his little, person and be like, okay, remember we had all those boards over there, so you start dragging them down here. I'm going to get the saw and grab the hammer and nails, and so I'd be running around this little raggedy tomboy with all the equipment, all the tools, the things I needed to work on building that foundation and that structure. So we had that perfect little home, that we could hide in when things got ugly in our house. We spent all day out there when we were able to do that. And as we built that, I think about the tools my brother gave me, teaching me one of the basics of even pounding in a nail straight so I wouldn't bend it. I don't know how many nails I actually bent. I wasn't strong enough, right, to get that nail in there. I didn't hit it right. My hand-eye coordination. I was just a little kid, and so was he. But we would spend hours, and we'd have maybe 15 nails all bent, and we'd finally get 3 or 4 in. And then if Dad was around, we would call in the help, because he'd come in and put in, 3 or 4 on each main point to hold it for us so that we could continue building, and he knew we were safe, that we wouldn't fall through. So the supports that we had within our family at times in our life were very helpful. And I think about some of that stuff, what it taught me now that I use as an adult, being able to reach out and find supports within my own community, right? My friends, coworkers, different places, things to meet the needs of not only myself, but the people I work with, the people I love or I care about, or children that come into my life. A lot of that stuff, all that structure, supports, and the tools my brother was giving me just by accident, by playing with me, you know what I mean, actually gave me that critical thinking and problem solving skills that you need as an adult to be able to manage your life, be successful in your job, in your home, with your own family, and your own children, and how critical that is for later on in your life. So all those hammering, the nails, the measuring, I was never great at that stuff, but I was given just a little bit of a foundation so I knew how to do it. I knew how to problem solve. And if I couldn't do it myself, I was given the skills to ask other people for help so they could come in and help me build that tree fort if I needed to, right? We could call on the neighbor kid. When we moved everywhere, we moved quite a bit. And whenever we moved somewhere, we always had to build forts. So eventually we moved close, like right on the edge of town, and we had a couple of neighbors that had kids our age, so we would call in one of the older kids. He could get the nails in better than we could, and so we called in those supports to help build up that structure and just make it more solid, and our tree forts got better all the time because we had more tools to do it properly, right? The more information we got, the more people we knew, the more we did it. We just kept being more successful at our chore and the thing we had assigned to ourselves. It also taught me how to build relationships because I needed those people to help me to secure what we were doing, right? My brother would send me off to the neighbors. He's like, go ask Lester and Vi if they have any wood. We need one about this big, says he, up to your chin. So I go run on over to our old neighbors. To me, they were like 100. They were probably 30 at the time. But I thought they were like these old people. I always wondered, how come they're so old? They got kids my age because they look so old. But I'd be like, Lester, do you got any extra boards? Oh yeah, Terry, and he'd go dig it. It'd take like forever to get what I needed, but I just patiently wait. And Vi might bring me out a cookie and some milk while I was waiting. But I'd get that wood and I'd be dragging and pulling it back down through the hills. We had hills and trees. And of course, we always had to have our forts the farthest away from the house we could possibly get. And so I'd go dragging all that. Who knows? I'm sure I was just this grubby little kid because I was always into something. And so building those relationships and being able to talk to people, not being afraid to talk to someone I didn't know or ask for a need. I think some of our families, at least that we work with, they do not know how to ask for those needs. They don't know where the resources even are. And so I think it's really important that we have that skill and that knowledge. And all of these skills are actually part of what built my everything. You. My reason I hate it. I try not to cry, and I know it's terrible of it. What build resiliency and things that I use in my life now. So then, my teen years, so 6th grade, my parents get divorced. It's the start of just a very, very dark hole for me. And I don't know how deep I'm going to get in it because I'll turn into a puddle probably. So the divorce happens. And I had to have been, like at age, I think I was 14 when my youngest sister was born. So there's a big age difference between my little sisters and me. So I always ended up being the one who had to watch them, because my mom wouldn't come home for days, and she'd be out drinking and bring strange men home, or just all kinds of stuff. So I was always taking care of my siblings. At that time, my brother had went off and got out of the house and was going to start college shortly, and he just needed to leave. And so all of that stuff, and I think the loss of my father, that person that he was gone a lot, but he was never abusive, never, I cannot recall anything bad that man ever said to me. He is the reason I love to read books. He used to, every time he went out on the road to get equipment, he always brought books home for me. So he thought of me when he was gone, and his offering to me was his love for reading, which was awesome. But my mom, after my dad had left, decided that I was her mark, and that I reminded her too much of my father. And so a lot of what I heard was, you're just a blankety blank like your dad. I wish I'd never had you remind me. Every breath you take reminds me of that son of a bitch. I mean, I heard daily basis, the verbal assaults got worse and worse, especially when she was drinking. Physical abuse started. I became, from sexual abuse that occurred back in the days when she was out drinking, and dad, when we went up to her parents' place with their siblings. I think a lot of that stuff started just really boiling up for me. And my emotional piece of who I was just truly, truly believed that I was useless, and I wished I would die. I never had the guts to kill myself. I never thought about killing myself. But I remember going to school my senior year. I signed up for accounting class. And mind you, I was not a loving teenager in school. I'm sure my teachers hated my guts and hated seeing me come. But I walked into my accounting class the first day, and the teacher said, my last name was Holt back then. He's like, Holt, get the hell out of my class, go to study hall, you ain't smart enough to take accounting. So I left and went to study hall. My senior year, I had 2 art classes and 4 study halls. That's all I had. And so I quit going to school. I started skipping, started hanging around. So I'm 17. I hadn't turned 18 yet. I was 17. Started running around with a 34-year-old man, and then ended up dating a 27-year-old man who were both addicts and selling drugs. So what do you think happened to me? I had parents who did not care. My dad was gone off with his new woman and his new life, and my mom was just a raging, crazy lady. And I did not want to babysit, basically. So I just started not coming home and making really poor choices that damaged me. I mean, I ended up running away. I was living down in the cities. I remember being back then it wasn't meth, it was crack. Heroin was really huge. I was shooting up, sleeping in closets and empty houses, living in my car, helping people, being like the driver for burglaries and robberies. I mean, I was in some dark stuff. I remember as I was processing after I started healing in my 4 years of stupidity, because it was about 4 years that it was just really a dark spot I was in. I just remember thinking about how I wished I would just die. And I wonder now if it was the use of all the drugs. I hope the drugs would kill me because I couldn't do it myself. But I remember waking up and just wishing to God I wouldn't. I mean, and so when I have a lot of empathy for the parents that we serve at CASA, because I understand how hard drugs are on your life, and even though your life sucks so bad, it's still, you can't quit using. You know, I don't know what it takes. I mean, I know my story, but everybody's story is different because we have different personalities, you know, and different perceptions of everything. So I have a lot of empathy with helping our moms and our dads and hopefully giving them time to find true recovery, because a year is not enough, right? AA, any kind of NA, it's a lifetime job of staying clean and staying sober. It doesn't happen in 12 to 15 months like our cases do. You know, so that is really a struggle and I know some of my team is here, and that is painful for us when we feel like we have to rush and we can't help our families the way we need to help them sometimes get through stuff, especially our kiddos. We want to do what's best for them and make sure that they have all their needs met. But those teen years were really hard for me. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, I must have been just between 16 and 17. It's very blurry, okay? There was a lot. It's very blurry. Somewhere in there, my mom somehow got the police to find me. And they said, you either going home, or they're arresting the guy you're with, and he's going to go to prison for kidnapping, child molestation, blah, the whole litany. So, of course, then he's like, yeah, you're gone, chick. You know, I ain't getting in trouble. I can use and abuse you myself, but I'm not taking the heat for this. So he brought me back, and they put me in it was a treatment facility to do assessments and stuff. I had used a lot of drugs, and I don't know why really at that point they found that I was not addicted. I was just a heavy user. Because I was there for several weeks, and I don't recall having withdrawals at the time or anything like that. That came later in a deeper part of where I ended up. So after I went through that assessment, all of a sudden my aunt and uncle, my dad brought me to my aunt and uncle's house. And they said they would keep me. So my dad's choice, he said, was to send me to like a long-term behavior facility like we have in Minnesota, but in South Dakota, or if my aunt and uncle would take me in, then that would work. And they'd already adopted kids. Their daughter was going through some of the same struggles I was. And so they took me in. And God bless them that they did. But I'll tell you what, I have never been killed with kindness until I lived there. You have to think about when you live in chaos and you live in an environment of anger, an environment where you don't hear kind words, and then all of a sudden the people are telling you how awesome you are, you think you buy it? You think it's comfortable? I didn't know how to do nice. I didn't know how to do kind. My aunt would leave me letters in my room, and I'd have to sit and read them, and I'd just be like, B, just come down here and yell at me, because this is bull. You know what I mean? This sucks. I hated her nice letters. I did not know what to do with them, you guys. I had no idea. I knew how to fight. I knew how to survive. I knew how to be in the battle. I knew how to overcome. I did not know how to live in silence, love, and kindness. I had no idea how to do it. It was so uncomfortable, and it was painful to live in that home, to pretend to be somebody I was not. But while living in that home, I think the tools that those people actually gave me that I didn't even recognize until maybe 10 years later. You know, you guys I'm sure have heard the story of planting a seed. You may never see the tree grow, but the tree will grow. I'm fortunate my aunt and uncle are still alive. They saw the tree grow. They've come to many of my speak when I've talked. And my aunt, I'll just say, you know what, Ruth? And I'll tell her a story. She's like, no, honey, I don't. Our parents were very kind. I do not understand how your parents could do that. My dad was always kind. He was just absent and chose not to protect us because I mean, he was scared of my mother too. And my mom, a story that pops into my head is my mom had false teeth. Thank God she's not alive because she hated me talking about her. She had false teeth. And I remember thinking of my mother as, like I said, that Heckle and Hyde Jekyll or whatever. And so when she had her teeth out, I was scared to death of her. That was the mean lady that did all the horrible things. But when she had her teeth in, because then when she had her teeth in, her hair was always fixed and she was always dressed and going somewhere, right? And so that was the kind, loving mom that I have some memories of during the week. And so I hated it when she took her teeth out. When she passed away, my little sister, God bless her too, kept her teeth. She still has them. Because I think she has good memories of my mom. Because my mom, we had a couple people in our neighborhood when we were little kids that had different disabilities. And so my mom would make a couple little boys laugh by pushing her teeth out. She'd go like that, and they would laugh. They're like, oh, Kathy, you know what I mean? And so I think Lacey remembers some of that stuff. And so she has, they're like a good memory. I think it's weird because we're all very broken in my family. But it is her memory. You know, for me, a good memory is Black Hills Gold. My mom wore a lot of Black Hills Gold, and she was always in a very good, happy mood when her teeth were in, her hair was fixed, she had her big necklace, her earrings, her rings on. And so when I see Black Hills Gold, I get this gush of warmth and family and love, because that's a memory that I have with my mom when things were good, right? Before the divorce, and then the weekdays when Dad was around. Anyway, I ended up living with my aunt and uncle. I finished my senior year there. So the day I graduated, I turned 18, I graduated from high school in May, and I stayed for the party, okay? That was like a big deal for me, because I was like ready to leave after graduation that Sunday, but they were having a party for me, and so I made myself stay. But as soon as that party was gone, that 26-year-old guy was waiting outside in my car, and I grabbed my shit and I left. And I didn't look back for a couple of years, and those were some dark times of things. There is nothing I did, I guess, that I can say like I'm truly ashamed of. I'm not proud of myself, but I'm not like horrified. Which maybe is a little broken in and of itself, because I did a lot of bad stuff. But I'm not afraid to talk about it, because it was during, like I said, some just really dark times in my life. And I believe based on a lot of the stuff that happened to me. So, growing up, after all that junk, I eventually, one day, I had gotten my paycheck, and I was going to go pay our rent, and all my money was gone again. Because the guy I was with always took my money. He never worked, he just bought and sold drugs and got high, and I worked and provided, and I didn't have money for rent again. And I was tired of moving because I got kicked out because I never had rent money. And I thought, that's enough. So I called a cousin of mine that lived here in South Dakota and said, will you come and get me? Because the guy had my car, I knew I wasn't going to get it from him, I just needed to go. I needed to leave. He's like, yep, sis, of course, sissy, breathe, it's okay. He drove down, he came all the way up from my Webster down to Minneapolis. I think I lived down on Lake Street at that time. Loaded up my stuff and took me here to South Dakota. That's kind of how I got here, and I haven't left. But having that support of my cousins and the aunts and uncles that were good people, that weren't alcoholics or, you know what I mean, abusive, and having those people in my life support me really made a difference and helped give me a hand up, right? Instead of hand out, I had to work for stuff. They helped me find a job, a place to live. They knew people like, hey, she needs an apartment. One of their friends like, yep, I got one. She had it cheap. Let's get her going, get her started, help her create a new life. And in there, somewhere I got in trouble with the law. I'm not going into that. I was very blessed. I had a judge who saw potential in me and gave me a suspended imposition of sentence, or I'd have never been able to have any of my jobs or do anything I would have done, because I would have had a felony on my record. But I was 17, just about 18 when I got into trouble, and by the time I went to court, I turned 18, and the judge was like, you know what, let's see what you got. And I've never gotten in trouble again. I've been drug-free. I mean, I've been able to just really change my life. But it was a lot to do with that support of people around me. And I also think of the tools that my brother gave me unknowingly, built that resilience in me to be able to change my thought once I got out of that dark world and started realizing getting education. I went to college, which was really helpful because I learned a lot about trauma. And it also made me learn that what happened to me was not my fault, right? As a child, we don't have a voice. We don't have a choice. We are put into situations and our children try to survive. And so that's what I was doing. So I was able to take a lot of that guilt and that icky stuff off of my own shoulders, even though I still deal with stuff. And I have to do a lot of self-talk to make sure that I'm not taking stuff personal and that I'm dealing with that normalcy of life in a positive way so that I don't suck myself into another dark hole just because of all the stuff. So my husband and I, we've been married 35 years, going on 36. We had 2 sons. And as a young mom, it was really important to me that my children did not experience what I experienced. So how many of you guys have done ACEs, the scoring and the study? So I score 7 on my ACEs. And I had my sons do their ACEs a few months ago, and they both had 0. Yes, Mary! Right? You can break generational trauma with knowledge. And that is something in Connington County where my crew is from. We are working really hard to make sure our families, our community understand adverse childhood experiences, because I do believe knowledge can make change. Like I said, would my life have been different if we could have educated my mom at her own trauma? Because she had a lot of trauma. So I actually don't blame my mother. At one time I did, but I don't anymore. I understand it enough to realize that what she went through was way worse than what I went through. My mom ran away at the age of 14 and told stories of stealing eggs out of chicken coops and eating them raw to survive. You know, she won't tell me all the details of why she left, but knowing her family, I can kind of picture a lot of it. And I think my mother was 100% better mother than her mother was. But she did not have the tools that I received as a young mother to make the changes. And so I forgive her, but I also thank her for trying as hard as she did, even though at times I felt like she failed. She actually did not fail. She was busting her butt to try to be the best mom that she could for us, and I respect her for that. I do. It was a hard life, but I think it could have been a lot harder. And I've been fortunate enough that I was able to give my children a whole different life. And I think, building resiliency in our children, it's so important to give our children choices. I think about this as a young child. If we're always telling our kids what to do, what to wear, where to go, how to do it, and their whole life until they're 15, 16, we're helicopter parenting them and making all these decisions for them. Who's going to make the decisions for them when we're not in the room? Right? We want to give our children choices. We want to teach our children to support and love each other. They're not supposed to take care of each other like in a sense as parents do, but I think giving those choices so they understand how to problem solve is really important, so that they're getting critical thinking skills. I was just talking to one of my moms the other day. Their child was having a tantrum, and I'm like, well, all you're going to do is, do you want to walk out, or do you want me to carry you out? Because you're going to end the tantrum and you're doing it. You want to wear your coat, or you want to carry your coat? Because no child's going to die from the house to the car for 3 minutes in cold weather. But maybe they'll learn that they need to put the coat on because it's cold. Are we letting them make choices that are safe now, so that they're not making choices that are unsafe later? And I think a lot of that stuff, I learned it as a little kid, but during those years of teenager, there was no one guiding me and helping me take those tools and bring them up the next level. I didn't have that support because my mom had just gone off the deep end and my dad was no longer there. My brother was gone. So I had that foundation, but I didn't have the rest of that support that I needed from 14 to 18 to really develop who I could be. Right? How about, all those positive relationships and normal life experiences? Those were all things that were really important for me to give to my sons. Especially the normal life experiences that I don't feel like I always had it. Is it normal? I want to ask you guys, how many of you guys got to drive your mom's car while they were all drunk with the music cranked, at 2 in the morning? See, but it's not normal, right? That is nothing I would ever have thought of doing with my children. I would have never even dreamt of doing that with my children. So I wonder, what could my life have been had my parents known that? So now, as a young mom, of course, I have to build forts with my sons. I mean, why wouldn't I? I experienced it most of my childhood. So I knew how to measure, right? I knew how to read a tape measure. Couldn't do the saw unless it was the hand saw. I was afraid of the skill saw. But we had wood, we had all the supplies we needed around. And so, my boys were both old enough, man. We were looking for trees, and we were sawing, and there was times we had to call Dad and be like, will you come cut some wood? And I I'm in the field. Good God, what are you doing? But he would come, and so he'd cut the boards before we got home at night, so we had enough for the next day or whatever. And I wish I actually literally, I don't do PowerPoints because they throw me off, but I wish I looked hard for some of our fort pictures because they were atrocious. Like, literally. When you're a kid, I remember being a kid with my brother, I thought our forts were amazing. I remember my mom would save up stuff in the basement for rummage sales, and so when we get done with our fort, I could decorate it. So I'd be like looking for old curtains and rugs, knickknacks. My brother hated it, but he's let me do it. Or if mom had some old paint, I'd be out there painting it. And I just thought, we had a palace. I mean, to me, it just looked like a palace. But then I see the pictures of it, and I'm like, no wonder Dad was like, really, can you build that like way down and then go way back there so no one sees that? So then building it with my kids, it was the same way. My husband would come home and just shake his head and be like, don't ever do architecture, Terry. You suck. But the stories, and even my children are now, how old are they? 34 and 32. At holidays, of course, they got to torture their mothers, so they talk about the horrible forts they used to build. But the stories that come out, I mean, the memories of the time I spent with them, or that my husband spent with them, that's what it's about. It's that foundation, right? It's not about the stupid fort. None of it is about the fort. It's about the relationship, the life skills, the critical thinking, the problem solving, all the tools that I was able to give my sons because of my experience with my brother, how important my sibling relationship with my brother was. What would my life even have been without him? As being the oldest child and two little sisters, 8 and 16 years younger than me, would it have even been more drastic and deadly? Would I have ever recovered as a young mom and be able to do that for my children? Or would my children have been removed and put in foster care and my parental rights been terminated? I could see where my life was going, that I could be in the same situation as the families that I serve. I was fortunate enough to have that base of a sibling that helped me do a lot of that stuff, and then a whole group of people at one point when I came out of being in trouble and met my husband in that life that changed for me, and having a solid support system and people in place to help me when I failed. It was a huge difference for me in what my life became and who I became. And watching, like I was talking about my relationship with my brother. So when I was all, of course, in my trouble and the bad years, I did not talk to my brother. I shut him out of my life as far as I could because it was too painful, because I could see in his eyes how disappointed he was. And so I think when we're in the dark spots of our life, we shove people away that we know love us. But as young adults, and now our relationship is even better, because we were like the only children in our home, really, when you think about it, because of our ages. By the time our sisters came along, it was really just us two. And we had that strong relationship. And he's made an amazing career in business. The man is like golden. He should share. I tell him that all the time. He sucks at sharing. He's like, Terry, you wouldn't listen to me then. I ain't listening to you now. He'll buy me lunch and supper though when I get him. I'm like, it's your turn to buy. But we have a really, really strong relationship. He comes back and forth from California and up in North Dakota a lot, and he drives. So he'll call me. He knows I'm up late, and we'll talk for 3-4 hours on the phone. And it's so nice. I'm sure, I think about the pain I probably caused him because he was my caregiver. And I'm sure he looked at all the bad choices I made as maybe he failed me. When it wasn't his job to take care of me, but he was given that job because we had parents who just weren't prepared to do what they needed to do at the time. They were going through their own struggles and different things. And so I hope now, he does not know I have this talk because I don't think he'd like it. So I just tell him it's called Building a Treehouse. I don't tell him it's like about him. You gotta have your secrets, right? But I think if he were in the room today, he would be very proud of how successful his love for me helped me to be. you know, because I do really give him a lot of credit for how strong he was, even in times of really hardness for him and for myself. I still always knew I could call my brother. I just chose not to because I felt too much shame to reach out to him, but I knew he was always there, even in the darkest times. If I would have called him, he would have come. He would have got me. He'd let me live with him. He had expectations for me. But at the time, I wasn't ready to meet those expectations, so I couldn't be around him because I didn't want to fail him one more time. You know? And so, we have a few minutes left. I'd like to leave you with some questions. If you want to know more, I'm more than happy to talk about it. I still have moments, you guys, where I can't breathe, where things feel very heavy for me. And I have Andre, a good friend of mine, is here, Sarah, Randy, some of my other friends. I mean, there's people that I have in my life that I can talk to and share the difficulty that helps me come back and be okay. But I still say, breathe, Sissy, just breathe. Because it is okay. For everybody out there, it is okay. You can just keep breathing, keep building relationships, help the children you serve, keep those siblings together because it does matter. And hopefully today I'll give you a new look at your siblings, even if you have conflict with them. I think our intent as siblings is it's out of love. You know, I have little sisters who I think a lot of times think I'm judging them, and I'm not. I'm trying to protect them. And so when you feel judged by your sibling, I want you to look at their intent. Because I know if most people's siblings want to hurt you, they're trying to help you, and that can help with some of the conflict we have so we can build a better relationship. Any questions, things you'd like to know more about? I'll open it up for you guys to ask away. Nobody? All right. Thank you then.